Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Okay, I just want to go back. Okay, so I just quickly want to start this morning with a question. Please raise your hand if you are talking about sustainability in your organization or in your boardroom. Great. I'm really glad to see this. Yeah, Imperial is saying they're talking a lot about sustainability. Big time. Great. Yes, because I really feel and I believe that you cannot be a purpose-driven organization without talking about sustainability. And if you're not talking about sustainability, then you really need to maybe update your CV or resume and find a new job, because I don't think an organization that doesn't talk about sustainability will still exist 5 or 10 years from now. Okay, so today what I want to talk about is sustainability, but you cannot talk about sustainability without talking about balance. It's all about balance. How do we balance these things within our organization? How do we balance our profit, maximizing our profit, with ensuring that we minimize the impact on the environment and that we minimize the impact of the people, negative impact of our people. So we need to maximize the impact of our people and our social well-being. Also, from a reporting perspective, we need to balance the financial reporting that we do with the non-financial reporting that we do. So it's all about this balance, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, but before I start, let me just give you some context for those that don't know the term of sustainability. From an academic point of view, I did a quick search on Web of Science, and what I found was if you search for sustainability or ESG, that's the sister term these days, in supply chain, this is the graph that you get. Okay, so what you'll see here is when you did your PhD in 2004, then you would have found between 2000 and 2004 about between 1 and 40 articles on sustainability. So it would have been very easy for you to do your PhD. But since the last 7 years, 80% of the academic articles has been found. So you can just see the exponential growth that from a literature point of view, sustainability is seeing for supply chain. Also, from a reporting perspective, this is a study from KPMG, and they are looking at the top 100 companies in each country. So they're looking at 52 countries, and if they are reporting on sustainability. So in 2020, that number was 80% compared to 2002, where it was only 15%. So you can also see that exponential growth in the reporting of ESG. Just to compare the different countries, you will see Middle East and Africa is sitting at 59% versus the North Americas at 90%. And then another very interesting statistic is IRAS. Who of you know IRAS? It's the Sustainability Disclosure Index. So what they are doing is they have defined 288 sustainability disclosure metrics specifically for South Africa, but it's based on the international standards. And they look at your public reports, and what they'll do is they will give you a rating as a South African company to see where are you reporting and which metrics are you reporting in your financial reports and integrated reports. So for the top 100 companies within the JSE, that percentage sits at 57%, and then for the others, that percentage is 41%. So what this slide is really showing me is that there's still a lot of work that we need to do with regards to sustainability and with regards to ESG disclosure within our companies. And yes, I know they talk about greenwashing, they talk about we're just doing it to be out there and to look good, but I think reporting is a very good start for any organization, because if you don't measure sustainability, then you cannot improve on it. So it's always a good start to start reporting on that, but then to take it further than just your annual report. So just some context, if you look at the most universal known definition for sustainability, sustainability is meeting the present needs without compromising the ability of our future generations to meet their own needs. So what does that mean? That means that in your organization, in your business, in your boardroom, every decision that you take, you need to think about what will be the impact of this decision that I'm making today. What will be the impact for our future generations? And you need to be very conscious about the decisions that you are making today. The definition for sustainable supply chain management is that we are managing our operations, our resources, our information, and our funds in a way where we can maximize our profit while minimizing the impact on the environment and maximizing the social well-being. So maximizing the social well-being of our own employees and also maximizing the social well-being of our stakeholders. So ensuring that we understand what our stakeholders expect from us and balancing what the stakeholders expect from us versus what is important for us in our organization. So just very quickly, ESG. So I'm sure you've heard the term ESG. ESG stands for environmental topics, your social topics, and your governance topics. And this basically comes from the investors, where investors want our organizations to report not only on financials, but also on these topics, the topics of environmental, the topics of social, and then also governance. Yeah, so this I found on LinkedIn the other day, and it really shows us still where the focus is on sustainability. So when we talk sustainability, or when a company talks ESG, you will hear about carbon neutral, you will hear about being carbon neutral and net zero by 2050, like Greta Thunberg said, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's all about climate change. And yes, it is important, it's really important, and we really need to look at ways to minimize our carbon emissions and even to get to that carbon neutrality. But what we shouldn't forget, and I think Johan Stein also said it this morning, we are living in Africa and there's a lot of pressing problems that we also need to focus on. We need to focus on inequality. We need to focus on unemployment rates. We need to focus on the water crisis in our country, poverty, education. So there's a lot of other things that we need to balance, and we need to ensure that we put equal weight, equal time, equal resources to all of these matters, and not only focus on climate change. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we balance all these things? It's putting a lot of pressure on our companies to not only report on the financials, but also report on the environmental impacts and the social impacts. How do we do this? So we are at For Excellence. I did my research. We did 7 years of research on this topic of sustainability. And we said that we all need to be responsible, and we all play a part in the sustainability journey. It's not a one-man show. It's not something that you should do in silos. It's something that we all need to work together on. And we really believe at For Excellence at co-creation. We really believe in partnering with organizations to help move people's thinking. So we see ourselves as an organization that is moving, not goods, like many of your organizations do, but of moving people's thinking. So that is what we do. And Imperial is one of those examples, and Esha will tell you of how we collaborated with Imperial as well and co-created the strategy for Imperial as well. So Esha will talk to you about that. So we really believe in that. And we've come up with this approach to sustainability. And it basically comes from, we are mostly industrial engineers, so we love to continuously improve our organizations. We believe in operational excellence in all we do. So we've come up with this concept through that lens of industrial engineering. So just to explain this, you're in a current situation. What will mostly happen is every year your EXCO team will go on do you know the term the mining people talk about, bosberaad? You will go on your bosberaad, and they will mostly go to an exotic location. That was now prior to COVID. They will go to this exotic location. They will have a nice weekend. They will talk about the future of your organization, and then they will come back with these amazing plans. And they will tell the organization, we have to cut our cost by 10%. Have you heard that? Yes. We need to increase productivity. We need to go on this artificial intelligence journey. We need to ensure that we meet the targets on our BE scorecard. Okay, so that is what they will come back. So this thinking of the EXCO or the leadership team comes from quality management, and they mostly will implement the approach of plan, do, check, act. So I'm sure every one of you knows the PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act. So this approach is great because it really focuses on continuous improvement. But it focuses on internal perspectives. It's mostly based on your current business model, what the company is doing. It's a continuous process, and it results in stepwise improvement. Okay, so I'm not saying don't do this. This approach did work in the past, and especially when companies faced financial struggles, it really helped you as a company to survive. But this approach will not get you to net zero by 2050. Okay, so we took this approach and we said, let's use systems thinking and the theory of complexity as well as participatory decision making, and let's adapt this approach. And we found that you can adapt this approach by exploring, designing, and adapting. Okay, so the thinking around the explore, design, adapt approach is about understanding complexity, understanding outside perspectives, or getting those outside perspectives within your organization and understand that. So when you talk systems thinking and you talk about this helicopter view that you take, okay, so it's almost like getting into a helicopter, going into the air, and you'll look down into your organization from the top, and you'll look at your organization a bit differently, and you'll see your organization as a system. And then you need to define what those boundaries of the system is. So you will include your suppliers and your customers as part of the system, and your employees will also be seen as part of the system. Okay, and then you can look at your company a little bit differently. Okay, so get those outside perspectives, and then also sometimes you need to start with a clean sheet. So start with the question, but why do we exist as an organization? And then it's sometimes necessary to maybe re-look at your business model and to decide that you need to change your business model to really get to that transformed future. And then you do all of this with a future conscious mindset. Okay, so if you look at the explore, design, adapt cycle, I'm sure that people like Elon Musk and Richard Branson has this type of thinking when they are doing their work, because they are ready to take risks, and they are ready to test their radical ideas. And if you can only get to that transformed future if you have people like that in your organization to really be innovative and testing the radical ideas as well. Okay. But what we are also saying at For Excellence is you cannot all of a sudden jump to explore, design, adapt. So if you traditionally, your people are used and you are in a culture of plan, do, check, act, then you need to still work on that cycle. But then take the people with you and bring in the cycle of explore, design, adapt. Okay, and I think Imperial did a great job of exactly doing this. So I would really like to give Esha the opportunity to tell you about that as well. But before Esha's joining us on stage, we thought, okay, let's give you some practical guidelines because we can talk theory the whole day, and it's always nice for an academic to talk theory, but what are those practical steps that you can take to create this balance for sustainability in your organization? Okay, so as I've said before, you start with developing a sustainability strategy for your organization, and you can also start with reporting and disclosing whatever you do, because I really believe the South African companies are really doing a lot of work. We know we've been busy with corporate responsibility for quite a while. We all have BE scorecards that we need to reach those targets. So leverage on those things that you are already doing. And even if it's small things, we worked with a company as well, and they're saying no, but they don't want to disclose this because if you compare what they're doing versus what a mining company is doing, it's so small. But it's not about how small or how big it is. It's not about how much money you throw into this. It's about what difference are you making as a company. So disclose what you are doing because investors want to see it and your customers and other stakeholders also wants to see what you are doing. So that's a very good starting point. But then integrate sustainability. Okay, so it's really, really important to make it part of your business strategy. It can't be something that you do and it's something that you do standalone. It needs to be integrated into your business strategy. You need to understand complexity. You need to understand how these things are working together. You need to understand the trade-offs that you need to make, and you need to understand unintended consequences. Also important to understand your risks and to think about the different possible futures that your actions will lead to. So understand those different scenarios and understand how you're going to manage those different scenarios. As I've said before, collaboration and partnership is really, really important. Collaborate with your customers, collaborate with your suppliers, and work on this together. Don't do it in silos. Change behaviors. You need to change your own behaviors. You need to challenge your own mental models, and then you need to start changing the behaviors of the people in your organization. So ask the difficult questions, build it into your awareness campaigns, build it into your training programs. Innovate and adapt, test, fail, test again until you succeed. So be innovative, test those radical ideas in your organization. And again, talk to the people to get the radical ideas and start testing those ideas. And then, as I've said, I think the most difficult one is go and revisit your business model. Why are we here as an organization? Start from clean sheet and have your future conscious mindset. Okay, and as you can see, these are building blocks. It's not steps. It's not a recipe. and it's all integrated. So you need to work on all these things simultaneously, and you need to monitor the whole time where you are. Sometimes you'll feel like you'll take 2 steps, you'll go 2 steps forward, and then it will feel like you are losing a bit of momentum. But move between these different cycles all the time. Plan, do, check, act, and then explore, design, and adapt. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to end off with Abraham Lincoln that said, "You cannot avoid the future by evading the present today." Okay. So, I'm going to give over to Esha, and I'm very excited for her to share the Imperial story with you.
Other direction. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Elaine. I think it's time to put your fantastic theories and plan to the test and see what this means practically, as you spoke about earlier. And I think standing here, as Esha, the person, I always like to say that ESG starts with me, because when we each have to ask ourselves the question, whether it's an individual perspective, whether it's a business perspective, whether it's a client perspective or an investor perspective. If you have to ask anybody, what does ESG mean to you or sustainability mean to you, I'm sure everyone's going to have a different view. And I think when you're looking at it from a purely business perspective, you're going to have to firstly understand that you can't be everything to everyone. And I think that's where a very focused ESG strategy comes into play. Because in your ESG strategy, and you'll see it later on, you have to be very clear, not just about your stakeholders' needs that Elaine spoke about, but you also have to be very considered about what you as a business want to stand for. And this is why I think my first slide is very apt, because many of us speak about being a purpose-driven organization, but do we really know what that means? And I think a lot of businesses particularly can tell you what they do and how they do it, but very few can tell you why they do it. And this was the starting point for Imperial, despite our 70-year-odd history, where about 3 years ago, we took the very deliberate decision of relooking at our strategy and what we call the strategic transformation of the business. And we actually started off with that very important question. Why do we exist as a business? And this is what we came up with. This is Imperial's purpose. Very simplistically, connecting Africa and the world and improving people's lives through access to quality products and services. And I think that really became the premise to our ESG focus and strategy. And you'll see as I progress on later on to show you what the ultimate outcome was in terms of our strategy on the slide, that your starting point always has to be about the why and the value that not only you can create today, but the value you can defend and ultimately sustain in the longer term. So one part of what I do is ESG at Imperial with the fantastic team and many ESG champions, some of which are represented here today across the business. But another part of what I do is marketing and comms. So in true marketing and comms style, I'm going to quickly tell you about Imperial for those of you that don't know. So Imperial is a leading African and European focused supplier of integrated logistics and market access solutions. Many of you would have interacted with our business in some shape and form over our 70-year history. You would have probably been following the news recently, in March to be precise. We delisted from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and we were bought out by a business called DP World. So now starts our new journey to integrate Imperial's values, purpose, and capabilities with DP World, which we see fantastic opportunity for growth in. In terms of our people, we're a large business of scale. We're across 25 odd countries, employing over 26,000 people. That's the latest number I have. So as you can see, a large business, a business of scale, a large employer. And this is where we can really use ESG not only as a client value proposition, but if we get it right, and Elaine alluded to it earlier, as an employee value proposition. And this is where you ultimately want to end up at the end of the day. What's also very interesting in terms of who we've become is not only the ESG journey, but the core focus on other critical non-financial enablers. So you can see that we've spoken about seeking and leveraging technology to grow and enable our strategy. That's also a core focus for Imperial, in addition to ESG, as well as our people being identified as our greatest asset. You can have the best resources, the best capabilities, but if you don't have the right people to execute it, you will not be successful. And do not forget that our people are a critical part of the social pillar of our ESG strategy. This is just a map to show you our operations, and with the acquisition of DP World, these capabilities will hopefully in time grow, and this footprint will potentially have a lot more dots and a lot more color, but this is our footprint as Imperial as it stands today. And so here we are, the strategy and the practical implementation of ESG. And Elaine spoke a lot about the building blocks, and the first building block was really about integrating. And, she mentioned integrating ESG into the business strategy. But what we've done as Imperial is we've taken it one step further. And if you look at the last pillar of our strategy, we actually want to integrate ESG not into the strategy, but into our daily business practices. And I think that's where it makes a difference. For all of us, not to look at ESG, as we spoke about earlier, as a tick box approach, or to only do it because you have to meet a BEE scorecard or to maintain your social license to operate. And in some companies, just a PR exercise because you have to do it. So let's make a great social media campaign out of it. But we don't actually do the right things in everything we do every day. And that was the deliberate decision we made as Imperial to integrate ESG into our daily business practices where it counts the most. So I think a lot of you in this room probably understand why ESG is important to you and to your sphere of reference. But as I said earlier, I think it's broader than the new buzzword. And I like to call it ESG. Elaine speaks about sustainability, and many of us call it different things. But what we found as a business of scale is that ESG is just a non-negotiable in this day and age. A few years ago, I think it was a big drive from the investor side of things. Coming from the investor relations background myself, I recall a few years ago, I think when the JSE included the Responsible Sustainability Index, investors started to come to you with a tick box to say, if you don't tick all these boxes and prove to us that you're doing the right things, and it was very safety and environmental focused at that stage, they will not invest in your business. But it's been fantastic to see how this has been an evolution to the point where our clients today, no matter how long a standing relationship we've had with them, will not renew a contract with us if we do not give them the certainty, the measurable targets, to the point of being able to measure, the measurable targets and commitment to align their ESG visions with ours. So ESG today, as I said earlier, is not a nice to have. If you don't do the right things today, which will require investment, in 2, 3, 4 years from now, your business will not exist. And I think it's something Elaine brought across quite strongly. We spoke earlier also about the risk component. There's a huge risk of not implementing the correct ESG practices in your business. It comes with significant reputational risk. It comes with risks, as I said, of not being able to renew or win new contracts. It comes with the risk of employees not wanting to stay with your business, because a lot of people today want to work with a good corporate citizen. They want to be part of a business that sees to be doing good for their environment, for their communities, for their country. So those are just the different lenses as to why ESG is really about a business being more than just being short-term and profit-driven, but it's really about taking the angles of also focusing equally on profit and people, as we've spoken about earlier. In a snapshot, this is Imperial's ESG journey. It started off with purely a sustainability focus many years ago where we did bits and pieces of ESG in pockets across the business, whether it was to tick a scorecard or whether it was being a listed company and ticking the reporting box. But as you can see, it's been an evolution. And I think for many businesses, you can sit back and while there might still be a lot to do, you can sit back and feel proud, not because of the activities you show in terms of ESG, but in terms of the progress and the improvement you show in that journey. And I think this is the point I want to make here. And I always say that, there's a lot of ratings agencies, there's a lot of reporting agencies, there's a lot of people that are out there trying to recognize good reporters in ESG. They're trying to recognize good performance. And what I always say is that those are the outcomes. If you don't get the base right, you won't ever achieve those outcomes. And it's always good to get patted on your back, right? I mean, Imperial's been very, we've been in a spot where we've been recognized by IRAS, for example, for the second year in a row as being top in the logistics and transport industry for reporting. But what people don't see is how you get there. And this is where the critical component of your ESG strategy and having key objectives and key measurables really helps you to achieve those outcomes. So I wanted to include Elaine's building blocks again, because as she spoke about earlier, before we undertook the process of having a very focused ESG strategy, as I said earlier, things were done in pockets, and it was a base for us to build from. So we're not forgetting where we started. Was spot on when she said it's about the building blocks, because I don't ever think you could get to an ideal state of what you want to be from an ESG perspective. But I just want to re-emphasize or reiterate some of the points she's made and how these building blocks have been relevant to Imperial and our ESG journey. So we spoke earlier about integrating sustainability, and that was a big tick in terms of the strategy. And now we've got a lot of work to do in how we take this down and integrate it into our daily business practices. The point of collaborate and partner, and we see that with various lenses. The one lens is how you co-create the strategy, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. But the second point is about collaboration and partnership with the key stakeholders in your value chain. And then the third point is also the collaboration and partnerships with your broader countries and communities of operation. Because you can have the best ESG strategy and your partners and stakeholders could be on board, but you won't be as successful if your countries and your governments and the regulators don't support and back this journey too. And then, of course, we'll talk a bit about the business model and what it means in terms of change behaviors. And I've got a great video to show you what change in behaviors actually means for Imperial. So this, in a nutshell, is how we went about formulating the Imperial process for our ESG strategy, obviously driven and supported very strongly by the 4 Excellence team. So we decided to take a co-creation approach, as you know. And I hope that a lot of my colleagues in this room can attest to this because they've been an integral part of co-creating our strategy. And what we decided to do was take a bottom-up approach. So having, kind of key business capabilities that we do, we decided to embark on individual workshops with our key businesses and the key stakeholder owners in those spheres. And we had a key set of criteria that we wanted to measure in terms of environmental, social, and governance. But through that process, we tried to understand from each business what their clients, principals, communities, stakeholders, etc., wanted from them, and what they already had in play, and thirdly, what they wanted to achieve in their countries of operation. And effectively, we followed the same approach, and then we cascaded this up into a broader overarching Imperial strategy, which I like to call a strategy on a slide. I don't ever believe that strategies should be complex 20-page documents. The simpler they are, the easier they are to understand, means that you get buy-in a lot quicker. So that was step 1. And parallel to that, together with the 4 Excellence team, we also did a benchmarking. Because it's all very well for us to have a view of what our stakeholders want, but we also equally have to understand what's happening in the world around us, what are our peers doing, and what's best practice, so that we can ultimately include those findings in the strategy as well. So that happened in parallel. Following on from that, we had alignment sessions across the business. We cascaded it up into a broader group strategy, as I mentioned earlier. We then got endorsements at the leadership levels to make sure that everyone was aligned and committed and put their hands up and said, we're going to do this. And then to get the endorsement, at that time being a listed company, at the highest levels of the organization. So we took it to the Social and Ethics Committee for their approval. And since then, we rehashed out the agenda for the Social and Ethics Committee to move away from just being historically safety focused to actually following the key objectives of the ESG strategy. And that was also a big mindset shift for Imperial. And then ultimately, once approved by the SES, it was endorsed by the board. And then we started that rollout process, I think it was in 2020. So here's my strategy on a slide, or the Imperial strategy on a slide rather. What's not included here are specific targets. We removed them because the slide was a bit too busy. But this is where we want it to be. Something that's simple, effective. This was the output of numerous workshops, numerous benchmarking, numerous debates, numerous discussions with our stakeholder groups before we said, well, this is the journey we want to follow. And what we found to be critical for us was also not to look at only the short-term objectives, but to start with the bigger picture in mind, to Elaine's earlier point, to look at where do we want to be. And the buzzword at that time was 2050, and we used data-driven insights to the best that we could to put on the table a net zero objective for 2050, and then a roadmap of how do we get there. So hence you can see the 2022 to the 2025 roadmap, and then the very specific objectives that we had attached to targets for each one of those objectives. And I think the other thing I also want to mention is Imperial made the bold step to link the non-financial strategic areas to KPIs and ultimately to STIs for our ExCo and at least for one business, the business ExCos. Because, they always say, put your money where your mouth is. And I think from an Imperial perspective, we all believe so strongly in this. And it's the same for digital and IT, and it's the same for people. And I think, making a big, bold move like that, when you basically say to people, we commit to this, but it's also going to affect your pockets at the end of the day, tells you very strongly how we are all very deliberate about changing this culture and focusing on ESG. And then, Elaine, I think, this is the slide again, and I wanted to just remind everyone here about the change behaviors component particularly. And I started off with the line, ESG starts with me. And, we've got the strategy, we've aligned on it at certain levels of the business, we've co-created it, our stakeholders are happy. But with 25,000 people, if you don't take your people on this journey, you will fail. And the flip side to that is to try to make every person that works at Imperial an ESG champion or an ambassador. And this is where that whole change behavior becomes so critically important. So for us, the end game was not the strategy on the slide. It was actually the beginning for us. And the hard work actually started to embark on this whole ESG change management journey to make everyone that works at Imperial understand the value that they can add for Imperial if they have the right behaviors and if we are all aligned to this common vision. And this is why I think change behavior actually starts internally before you start cascading it outside of the organization. So that's a good segue into the Imperial ESG starts with me. And I just want you to take a quick few minutes to look at the progress we've started to make in the business, not because of the strategy on a slide or because of the decisions that were made at the leadership level, but because our people in our businesses are starting to believe that they have a responsibility to ESG.
Because we need to do better, we need to save more, we need to not only think of today, but we need to think of tomorrow.
And when I come to work in the morning, I like to see and I like to know that my kids are going to be okay tomorrow. So therefore, we have to do our bit from a personal point of view and from a company point of view. Fortunately for me, I'm aligned with the company that also supports all these initiatives.
I'm actually very excited of where we're going. There's a lot of good things that we're going to implement.
We are the captains of industry, and we need to lead the way.
Yeah, I think we all have our part to play. So as a business, I think it's good for us to already be on that forefront and saying, this is already what we are doing. We want to be different.
And to do, even if it's in many other people's eyes a small thing, do it, because you can do it. And if you in your heart believe it makes a difference, do it so much more.
I think for everyone, it starts with yourself, and it doesn't matter how small or big it is. Everybody always believes that you have to go big or go home. No, you need to start with the small, little examples, and you have to walk the talk.
I'm Peter Greet.
Ronald Erasmus.
Eric Bossert.
My name is Jabron Mansingh.
Piet van Jaarsveld.
Christel van der Merwe.
I'm Brandon Govender.
I'm Andre Besson.
I am Zanetta Thomas. I'm Marlene Fisagi.
James Makuribela.
I am Bitse Boersma.
My name is Simi.
I'm Heinrich from Goldfields Logistics.
My name is Ben Intoba. I'm Frank Kronis.
I'm Jan Christo Koetser.
My name is Werner van Meulen.
Chris van der Hevel.
My name is Tapesh Chobe.
Daniel Ramabele Maswangali.
And ESG starts with me.
And ESG starts with me.
ESG most definitely starts with me.
And ESG starts with me.
ESG starts with me.